you can imagine that. But we have a pretty good relationship with the Yeti community. Of course, all this information is confidential, and it's consolidated into this annual report that we present to the Board of Supervisors. Usually it comes out about every June. So one of the things about the report that I want to point out is it delineates the gross value of the agricultural products that are produced in the county. It has nothing to do with what the return to the farmer is. It's simply the value of raw agricultural commodities that we produce. So when I first got to Sonoma County, one of the things I noticed is that we had all these old crop reports going way back to 1928, and some of them are one, you can see how fancy it's gotten today, you know, with the colored photos and everything, and it's a small book. But back in the 20s and 30s, it was one single sheet of paper, you know, that was done on a typewriter. So when I got there and I noticed we had all these great records going back to 1928, I thought, what a great way to sort of review the agricultural history of this county and see how it's evolved over the years. It's fascinating. So we scanned all those documents and we have them online on our website now. So if you ever are interested in that, it's really fun to go back and sort of look. You know, we used to grow a lot of prunes, a lot of hops. We've grown all sorts of different things in Sonoma County. It's an amazing county in terms of what you can grow. And I always say everything from salad greens to citrus, and we can produce it here. In fact, we even have a new lemon orchard going in in Sebastopol. So that's a little bit of background. A lot of the photos I'd like to point out were taken by Steve Knudsen of the Sonoma County Farm Bureau. He's a great photographer, somebody we work with a lot. And then every year we do a different theme for the crop report. In 2014 we did livestock of Sonoma County. So we try to switch it up every year. On the inside cover there's a nice history of the livestock industry in Sonoma County and how it's evolved over the years. And I'll talk about that a little bit in my presentation. So for 2014, we broke all the records. This was the highest total value for agriculture in the history of Sonoma County at almost 900 million, 899 million. This represents a 6% increase from the 2013. So 2013 was the biggest wine grape crop we've ever harvested in Sonoma County. And that was the the second of 3 very large wine grape crops. It doesn't look quite as good this year, as John will tell you, but it's pretty amazing that during the drought that we've had those large wine grape crops, and a lot of people, they can't equate how can we have such a large crop during such drought years. But you look back in the history of the North Coast, the biggest wine grape crops have always been on the driest years. With wine grapes, a lot of it is a matter of how much moisture there is in the soil profile during bloom, and when fruit is being set, and also the weather during bloom. So if those two factors come together, you can have a big crop despite a really dry year. What's interesting about the increase for 2014 is usually it had to do with wine grapes because that is the dominant crop obviously in the county, and it accounts for about 2/3 of the agricultural value that we produce. But there's a little bit different story in 2014 because the price of milk as well as beef and lamb really increased dramatically, which changed some of the numbers. So the theme, as I said, was livestock in Sonoma County. We do have a long history of livestock production here in the county, and that although the cattle and sheep numbers have decreased over the years, it still remained a very viable industry because we are really responding to the niche market that the Bay Area represents. So the sheep industry here really peaked in the 1960s with about 150,000 head. We only have about 35,000 head of sheep roughly now, but we really evolved to cater to this specific market. The cattle industry, similar situation, peaked in the 1980s. But what we do now is we've really geared our industry towards grass-fed beef, towards organic livestock products, as well as new things called pasture-raised pork, where they actually have pork that is raised on a pasture situation where it eats a lot of natural food instead of feed, and so the quality of the meat can be a lot better. One of the other things we've done is we're raising specialty breeds of cattle now to cater to these certain markets, mainly because of meat quality. So, and we feature some of those on the inside cover of the crop report. If you look, we got Scottish Highland cattle, we've got what we call Wagyu, which is the same as Kobe that they raise in Japan, but it's sort of like sparkling wine and champagne. We can't call it Kobe, we have to call it Wagyu. So wine grapes, there was a slight decrease in wine grapes in the 2014 crop, and the tonnage was down about 5.5%. That was offset slightly by the price per ton increasing. So really the main reason for that decrease is because of the 3 good years we've had in the wine grape industry, a lot of growers are taking that money and reinvesting it in their vineyards. So we have a lot of older vineyards now that need to be replanted for a variety of different reasons. So a lot of replanting of vineyards is going on right now as we speak. But the total value of wine grapes was $592 million, which a 2% decrease from 2013. So livestock and poultry products, this is where we really saw the dramatic increases in 2014 for a bunch of different reasons that I'll go through here. 40% increase in total value from 2013 to 164 million. Really, we have the dairy industry. It's really interesting to see what's happened to the dairy industry over the years. We used to have as many as 120, 130 dairies. That number has been reduced now to about 70 just over the past 20 years or so. We've gone from about 120 dairies to about 70 to 75. It fluctuates. But what our dairy industry has really had to do to compete with some of these large dairy operations in the southern part of the state is really go towards organic milk production and organic products. So now 2/3 of our dairies have converted to organic, and that's really opened up a market for them. There's a higher price paid for organic milk. So the price of market milk increased 23%, resulting in an overall increase of milk values of over $20 million. So also a 98% increase in the value of eggs. As many of you may know, we used to be a really large egg producing county, and Petaluma, really got its reputation from eggs and poultry. Over the years, that industry has moved to other parts of the state, but we still have several large egg producers in the county. So the drought is going to affect a lot of these livestock industries, and I'll talk a little bit about how that works. But with eggs, we have a big, you can count on the price of eggs going up tremendously. It already has if you've been to the supermarket, but you'll be seeing $6, $7 a dozen for eggs soon. And one of the main reasons for that is avian influenza that has hit the Midwest. So Minnesota is sort of ground zero for that, and Iowa. So they've depopulated about 50 million birds now because of this avian influenza. It's a concern of some of our egg producers here because it's spread by migratory birds in the flyway. So as these birds migrate, they carry this disease, they can pass it to poultry operations that are located in the flyway of some of these birds. So eggs are going to get very expensive, more expensive very soon. So the total value of livestock and poultry production increased by 37%. Beef and lamb meat prices were up really significantly. What happens when we have a drought like this is livestock producers, what they tend to do is reduce the size of their herd to what they can afford to feed, because feed costs are so high, and it particularly impacts our producers because we have to buy organic feed. Like for the dairymen that have converted to organic, you just can't buy any feed. So now you're looking at $10,000 for a truckload of hay for some of these dairymen. So it's, even though the prices are up for beef, for lamb, for milk, the margin for the producers is still rather thin because the cost of feed is so high. And so overall, we've had droughts in Texas, droughts in California. We have beef producers that'll move cattle back and forth between California and Texas. Texas has recently experienced a lot of good rainfall, so we have the shifting of that industry back there. But it's
Texas will take our cows.
Sure, you bet.
They're California cows.
Yeah, they are. They're happy cows. So the result of a lot of this is those increases in production costs are passed along to the consumer. I think the beef inventory for the U.S. in general is at its lowest level in decades. So the cost of beef is also affected by the drought. One of the things that makes it profitable to be a dairyman or a livestock producer is how much of your own feed can you produce. And that is one of the limitations I think we have here in Sonoma County. Is ground is very expensive. So to dedicate ground to the production of hay and silage crops can be difficult, especially with the pressure for development on that ground. So the drought has drastically affected, this is where the folks that have been hardest hit is the crops that rely on rainfall for their production. So silage and hay, grain, those sorts of things. So we saw a 41% decrease in the value of these field crops, as we call them, due to significant reductions in yield. To offset that, though, what it's done is ranchers are looking for good rangeland, good productive rangeland, which tends to be more towards the coast in this county. That obviously, the farther inland you get, the drier it gets. So the value of that rangeland in terms of lease rates has increased due to the increased cost of feed, which slightly offsets some of the losses in field crops. So this is a good conversation for this group because, you know, the apple industry obviously is centered here in the West County. This is you know, I've worked in 3 counties. This is a really unique situation you have here in Sebastopol area. It's very much what I say is sort of a transient crop because 98% of the fruit we produce, our apple, go to processing. We're very, very fortunate to have Manzana here because they want more fruit. They're getting growers to convert to organic production. So when you're farming things like apples or pears, when I was in Mendocino County, I worked with a lot of pear growers. A lot of times it's more profitable for the grower to just send all that bulk fruit to processing because they don't have to pay for the expense of cleaning and packing. When you start getting into cleaning and packing fruit and all those things, that a lot of expenses are associated with that. So in a lot of situations, it's more viable for the grower just to simply give all that fruit in a bulk way to the processor, and it can be more profitable. So apples, you know, in this county, it's really difficult to keep track of. Is that orchard being farmed or is it being gleaned, as we call it? And you know, in the industry, we call this organic by neglect. So sure, if you never do anything, it's organic, isn't it? So we have a lot of that in the West County, and a lot of, you know, shifting around of who might be harvesting. So there's very little farming inputs that go into some of these operations. It's just simply let's mow the grass so we can pick up apples. But cider and applesauce, you know, that's where most of this fruit goes. So more than 80% of the acreage now is organic. This last year, 2014, was one of the worst apple crops in history. And this is something, and as Joe mentioned, I was on the Secretary's Climate Change Consortium. So looking in our group, what our goal was is to figure out how can agriculture adapt to some of these climate changes. It wasn't the other side of the coin where we're looking at how can we lower our greenhouse gas production. It was how do we adapt to some of these changes that we're already experiencing from climate change. And one of the things that's really impacted tree fruit producers is chill hours. So most crops that go dormant need a certain amount of winter chill hours to be productive. Apples are one of those crops. Stone fruit is also, like peaches and such, require even more chill hours than apples. But what we've noticed in talking to folks like the Duttons is the winters have just been too mild. We are not getting enough chill hours, and that really affects how the trees bloom. So rather than all the bloom coming out at once, you have this sort of scattered, spotty bloom, and then you end up with different sized fruit, and it's really a bad situation for a lot of the tree fruit growers. They're really having problems in the Central Valley with this. And I think one of the solutions we looked at the Climate Change Consortium is developing varieties that need less chill hours. So one of the things associated with that is getting the consumer to get used to some of these varieties. They're new varieties that you're not used to seeing in the supermarket. So keep an eye on that. That's something that we're a little bit concerned about. So we've had overall reduction in value of $2.4 million. We really made a concerted effort this past year to reevaluate the acreage and figure out what's being farmed and what isn't. It's really difficult to sort of nail that down. It's a moving target. So we did have some changes that we made to varying acreage because some of it's back in production, really being clean, as I said. One of the industries that we don't talk too much about here in Sonoma County is our nursery industry. We have over 100 wholesale nurseries in the county that produce all sorts of different nursery stock. Obviously, with the drought, this industry has been affected because people aren't buying as many ornamentals. Maybe people are buying some xeriscape plants now and tearing out their lawns. You're seeing a lot of that. But in general, the drought hasn't really helped the nursery industry. And the value reflects that. It's down 70% from the 2013 value. One of our biggest nursery stock producers is Novavine in the Sonoma Valley, which produces grapevines. So the value, the $25 million, a large portion of that is due to grapevine nursery stock. And as I mentioned, a lot of growers replanting vineyards, so there's been a huge demand for grapevine nursery stock. So we have actually 3 divisions in our department now. We have our agricultural division, we have our weights and measures division, and then we have another division, a newly formed division we call land stewardship. So most of the programs we administer, as I said, we're an arm of the state. So we're administering that for the Department of Pesticide Regulation, for California Department of Food and Ag, or for the Division of Measurement Standards. Our new division primarily handles county-based responsibilities. So one of the main responsibilities I have is the VESCO program. I oversee all vineyard development, all replants. That is probably the program that takes, I would say, 50% of my time I spend on that program. Obviously, it can be controversial, vineyard development in Sonoma County. I'm sure everybody's very well aware of that. But it does take a lot of time. So the Ag Division highlights, as I said, we're very close to eradicating European grapevine moth. We place and maintain almost 7,000 traps throughout the county to detect this invasive pest. We reviewed and permitted 130 vineyard projects in 2014, 47 new vineyards for 629 acres, 83 replants for 650 acres. We're averaging about, I'd say, 600 to 1,000 new acres a year with vineyard development. We really focus a lot on sustainability. We work very closely with Sonoma Wine Grape Commission and growers, and even little things like recycling your plastic. We produce a lot of plastic in the production of these agricultural commodities. So we hold 2 recycle events every year, very successful recycling events. We also inspect incoming plant material into Sonoma County to keep pests out, as I said, one of our big responsibilities. And we certify exports. Anything produced in this county that's going to go to another country, we have to certify that it meets the importing country's requirements. Weights and measures, just really quickly, we registered over 31,000 commercial devices that we test for accuracy. We've inspected over 8,200 devices, including almost 4,000 retail fuel pumps. One of the things we also do in this county is we have a scanner ordinance. So any business that uses a point-of-sale system or a scanner, we audit those businesses to make sure that they're not overcharging the consumer. This is a really valuable program in Sonoma County. I can tell you we have a lot of issues with consumers being overcharged from scanner violations. And so we average about 50 to 60 enforcement actions a year against businesses that are overcharging Sonoma County consumers. So, this is a presentation that I did for the Sonoma County Alliance, and with the drought going on, there's obviously been a lot of pressure on water use, not only residential but agricultural water use. So I was asked to talk a little bit to the Alliance about what grape growers are doing for the drought. What are they doing to conserve water? And I think, the growers are doing a good job of trying to get their message out there. But some people I run into, they assume that growers aren't doing anything to conserve water, which is absolutely not true. Growers are really going out of their way to conserve water, and I've been trying to facilitate relationships between the State Water Board and the growers in terms of voluntary reductions in water use that Ag is developing right now on 4 of the key tributaries to the Russian. But I just kept this slide in here because I thought I would mention a few of the things. We really increased the use of recycled water. Where I live in Healdsburg now, there's 1 million gallons a day of recycled water available for agricultural use. A lot of the producers in Healdsburg have taken advantage of that. We're pruning for smaller canopies. There's lots of educational seminars. Growers have really moved towards fans for frost protection rather than water for frost protection. So we've increased in a huge way the number of fans that are out in the field being used. Also having your irrigation systems tested for efficiency, and also dry farming. We have quite a few growers dry farming. Not every site and situation is appropriate for dry farming, but there certainly has been an increase of that. And of course, wine grapes is one of those crops that doesn't use a lot of water. It actually benefits from what we call deficit irrigation, from stressing the vines to produce a higher quality fruit. So I come across a lot of people that say, we have too many wine grapes, why do we need to plant more wine grapes? I've worked in a lot of different cropping systems across the state and with a lot of different crops, and usually what I say to people is, what other crop should we be growing here that uses less water, less pesticides, and provides a better return per acre for the grower? Because if you're not economically sustainable, the rest of it sort of doesn't matter. So I ask that all the time. The one answer I've got that's had any viability is marijuana, but that's a whole other, that's a different presentation. But you watch, that's coming. That's my prediction, is that's coming. So I'll wrap it up there, and then if anybody has any questions.
I got a question. So what's the value in segregating the apple crops, the Ravenstein from the olive?
It depends on the use. I mean, certain varieties of apples are better for cider, whereas others are better for fresh market. And obviously the Ravensteins are the early crop. They're the ones that are harvested first. And of course that the reputation of this area was really built on the Ravenstein apple. So I think the value in the Ravenstein is the fact that it's a great cider apple. Not considered as much of a fresh market apple, but of course, you know, now that a lot of this is going to processing, sort of the importance of the variety isn't as significant as it used to be, because a lot of it just gets processed into vinegar or applesauce and so forth. Yes, I'll work my way across here.
What's the status of the olive and olive oil industry?
Yeah, the olive oil industry is actually doing pretty well. You know, one of the things that has affected the industry pretty significantly is the olive fruit fly. So we have a new pest that over the last 10 years that came in on olives, and in this past couple of years, the populations of the fruit fly have been very high. So olive growers used to never have to spray any pesticides, but now they're faced with a situation where they have to control this insect pest. So it's very much sort of a boutique crop in that it's associated with a lot of the wine grape producers. We don't have the broad olive production that you would see in the valley where it's bulk oil production. It's more specialized and more associated with the wine grape industry. But I think it's a really good sort of boutique crop that goes really well with wine.
How many staff members do you have?
Good question. I have 36 permanent staff and 27 seasonal staff. We hired a lot of seasonal staff to put all these bug traps out and such. But in the county system, that's a smaller size department, actually.
You mentioned that the avian flu had an impact on egg prices.
Yes.
Would you comment on the age limitations,
Yes.
restrictions, and its impact on prices?
Yeah, great question. In fact, I actually had that in my presentation. I didn't mention it, but Proposition 2 has had a major impact. So, and that actually hit before the avian flu became a problem. So you were already seeing egg prices go up as a result of the producers passing along the cost of compliance with Proposition 2 to the consumer, because that took effect January 1 of this year. So all these egg producers have to have a certain amount of space for the hens, and so definitely that contributed to the increased cost of eggs.
How about the lack of the bees to pollinate the crops? Is that a factor in some of the reductions you've seen?
Not so much really. Wine grapes don't need bees for pollination. Apples can benefit from bee pollination, but we haven't seen a lot of that impacts from lack of bees. Of course, a lot of the bee populations are down, and there's a big controversy about is it associated with pesticides, is it associated with these other issues. But certainly the pesticide issue is one that's gotten a lot of attention, so the state is in the process of reevaluating these neonicotinoid pesticides, as they call them, to see if that's sort of the silver bullet in terms of what's been affecting the bee populations.
Has there been any effort to encourage and to assist the owners of smaller acreage with older apple orchards to replant? I'll give you my experience in this regard. I have a 1.5 acre apple orchard, and I said this 80-year-old orchard. I actually met the guy that planted it. And I encountered significant administrative hurdles and costs to simply replant the orchard, and there are a lot of orchards out there that are of my size that are being gleaned and have old and dying trees that are not fully productive, and you wonder why the apple production is down. This is part of the reason, and again, has there been any thought given to this? Because having to get a permit and a biological evaluation for a 1.5 acre orchard, I feel foolish for having done that. Some people tell me that have been foolish. So any response?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. We have been under a tremendous amount of pressure over our vineyard development ordinance, our VESCO ordinance, over the past few years. We've had 4 lawsuits against my department just in the past 18 months over vineyard development, and a lot of people want to see vineyard development go to a discretionary process. In other words, be subject to CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. So the county is having to make adjustments based on all these legal challenges to protect the county from liability, but also the growers. So back when they formed this ordinance, they lumped vineyard and orchard together. It's the vineyard and orchard sediment control ordinance. But we haven't had any new orchards of any significance outside of a little 1 or 2 acres here or there replanted in over 20, 25 years. What's been happening is that that ground is under huge demand for wine grapes, so there's a lot of pressure on this apple acreage to convert over to wine grapes. You know, I have said to the Board of Supervisors before, if we really want to increase local food and encourage that, you know, a lot of the wine grape industry, they can afford to pay some of the fees associated with replants, but you know, when you're an apple farmer, the margins aren't as big, so it's more difficult to get that done. But since we haven't seen a lot of interest in replanting orchards come through our office, there hasn't been that need to go to the board and say, we have all these people that want to replant orchards, but they can't really afford it. So we do have a half-acre exemption for a hobby orchard, but anything beyond that is subject to our VESCO standards, which have gotten more stringent over the years just based on the fact that we're under tremendous legal pressure and scrutiny.
Well, if you need someone to complain to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. I might. I always need somebody to complain.
All right, thank you very much. And I have a little drawing for you, so don't go away.
No wrap.
No wrap. Oh, so
I was reminding them that they're required.
great, well, thank you very much. The other duty, where did my speaker go? Oh, please. Lost in conversation. Okay, so I'll take advantage of my selfie opportunity. There is a door prize that I guess will hang on to this very special door prize that was brought in by McLaughlin. We've had a lot of door prizes over the
Where did we get tickets to?
park.
Because that's why we didn't have a raffle, they couldn't find any tickets.
Well,
No
Bruce.
tickets.
That is the censor. The ticket mystery will be solved by next month. We have a joke. Tilbury joke. Jeff Dunbar is on deck for that. So you can get that joke. No. Anybody have
I remember seeing something. Let's see. All right. In honor of our speaker and ag business in general, I have a themed joke for us here. So, what kind of bees produce milk instead of honey? Why, boobies, of course.
Trails to you, happy trails to you, keep smiling until then.